Welcome back to the Lanterne Rouge Cycling Podcast, our last World Tour recap of the year. We've got the Paris Tour highlight video tomorrow. Here with Benji, as always, for the recap of Il Lombardia 2021. As always, this show is supported by Cor, who produce performance cycling apparel. If you want to check out some change of season winter kit, you can check that out, www.lecol.cc, produced at the base of Monte Grappa, not near Lombardy, where we'll be talking about the race today. But yeah, thanks to Cor for supporting the podcast since its inception last year. Different route this year. We went over it in the preview, 240 Ks, 4,600 meters of climbing. The main part of the race, the last third of it, Docena climb, 11 Ks at 6%, goes into a rolling ridge line, then the Zambla Alta, 2.6 Ks at 7%, technical descent. Then they do the Passo di Ganda, the last long climb. Last 3 Ks are 9%, 8.5%, but it's not as steep before then. It's like 11 Ks, I think, as well, or 10 Ks. Technical descent again, lots of hairpins, false flat downhill. Colle Aperto is about 4 Ks, 5 Ks from the finish, 1.3 Ks at 7% before it looks like false flat downhill to me. Finish in Bergamo where they'd have a sprint if it was a group. We had Roglic, Pogačar, Adam Yates, De Koenig Quickstep stacked with Evenepoel, Alaphilippe, and Almeida. And it was Israel's startup nation, Benji, who took it upon themselves to send the most riders forward to pace the early break.
Yes, certainly. They were doing so with Chris Froome at the start as well. And that was, I guess, for Woods as their leader. Dan Martin seemed to be working for Woods today. So I'm guessing that was the plan they had set out for themselves early on. And I was kind of surprised to see Froome in this race because it's a bit odd to use him as your rider to pace in Lombardia while you've got the UK Championships, the Great Britain Championships. Sorry, that's the difference. Coming up that he has to opt out of because of this selection. Nonetheless, that breakaway did not exceed too much of a gap. We had Kampenarts in there with the likes of Bakelons. We also had Wellens, Garosio, Gebreigzabir. But in all honesty, all these riders that this break isn't going to make it today because there's enough teams in the peloton that don't have anybody in that front group, that are the teams that have the favorites of this race, that are not in that group. So that Jumbo will kick in and that the Koenig will kick in. And that seemed to be happening on the first 2 climbs of the day. We had some crashes in the peloton, mostly AG2R riders though, Cosnefroy and Haninen. They both had to abandon because of their crash. And both seemed like they were a bit concussed and dizzy and so forth. So happy that the doctor told the guy with the bike for Haninen that he should not be getting on the bike anymore and pulled him towards the medical car. So that's a good part of that. But said he was working quite a bit on the climbs, the earlier climbs. But I felt like Jumbo was taking over every single time that it actually started the climbing. And Baumann was a factor in that quite a lot in the early part of this race on the Roncola climb or Benno climb. He was very, very active. And it wasn't going to be until the Docena climb where we actually saw some action happening. We saw a move by Dunbar near the bottom of that climb, Bajoli following already. So you're starting to notice that you're going to see satellite riders pop up. Dunbar for Adam Yates. You have Bajoli for whoever was going to end up as the leader of the Koenig in this race. And that was not the only attack. Kruijswijk was then the next rider to close that down, and UAE riders. So you've got literally every team of the favorites of this race trying to get ahead with riders that are not their leaders. That group got caught once other riders decided to attack again. And we saw a move by Ben Tullet on the left side of the road. Strong rider. You're going to hear a lot from him in the future, moving to Ineos, right? Is it true?
Yes, he's going to Ineos.
Okay, he was moving together with Sivakov, so his future teammate. Masnada in that break already, so Masnada doing some work very early on as well on this Docena to get into moves and be a satellite rider today. George Bennett also in that move, although he seemed to be having a bit of trouble following this move. He was hanging on by a shred at the last spot of this 4-man group, but attacks followed again. Paulus, Storer, and eventually that was all closed down. Next attack, Gegenhardt, again a satellite rider, but Devenan said no and was like, I'm going to keep on pacing. This is just, everybody just keeps on attacking and I don't want that. I want this to be a bit of a normal tempo. Come on, people. And he started hammering it a bit at the front without going too fast. He kept Gegenhardt like 10 meters ahead of him, but he kept a good tempo up. And it was another attack that followed. The likes of a Sivakov, we had Hirschi, Masnada, and Vingegaard and Bardet in that move. And Simon Yates was dropping at the start of that attack. So very notable that Simon Yates once again seemed to be a bit out of form, looking at how he was beaten at the Crow Race last week. Then again, not the most mountainous sparkle, but still beaten by Stephen Williams, like we mentioned in the preview. But yeah, all these early attacks, you think that it's logical for a Vingegaard to respond to a Sivakov so early on in this race, or a Masnada to have already responded twice in this race, or did you not see Masnada as a rider that was going to be in the last few riders today?
Well, no, I didn't, and I'm not sure many other people did, to be honest. But
Me
Jonas, I
neither.
was surprised by. Like Jonas, I'm like, you'd be a co-leader on a lot of other teams. I was surprised to see him used in that way when maybe if they're wanting a group to get to the finish with Roglic for the sprint, you need another teammate. If you don't have another teammate and you're the strongest sprinter in a group, you got problems. So I was surprised they used Jonas in that way, and they had to lean on him heavily later. Although De Koning also did the same with Masnada. So yeah, that was surprising to me, and I guess that's just then it's not been the same Benji this year. He's obviously off to UAE next year. I didn't really like the signing too much. I think they signed him based on what happened in 2020. Same happened with Bora and Hindley. But anyway, their team wasn't that strong. But no team, De Koning was the strongest team overall. Even though...
In the descent that followed.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. What did you see on that descent?
Well, we saw that Bajoli, the rider that had attacked already, moved to the front of the group. There was another rider in second position. It could have been Masnada. I honestly don't know at this point because we were watching from the stratosphere with this helicopter. Like, we barely could see anyone or recognize anyone, only that three De Koning riders were at the front hammering it because that's what the motorbike camera at the front was showing. And Alaphilippe was sitting in third wheel. So my thoughts were, okay, Alaphilippe is going to be having a bit of pushing going on because, well, on the last part of the Zamba Alta that just gained before the descent, they were moving forward already. So something was about to happen. Now, with Alaphilippe moving with these two riders in the descent, and the fact that on the climb before, Evenepoel was outpositioned every single corner. He was moving back after every corner. On the long stretch, he was trying to move up a tiny bit, but it seemed like something was off. Positioning or form, I didn't know yet at the time. And I guess we're going to find out on the next climb, shall we? Because that descent did split it up quite a bit. There was a group of 5 gone for a second. Bardet being in one of the riders, as always, that is great in the descents. But that group was caught again. Roglic and Jumbo came back just at the bottom of the descent because they were on a gap during the descent. But then the last climb was about to happen, the Passo di Ganda, and they arrived at that bottom with pretty much everybody. And the Koenig was once again the ones that were putting it up there, were setting it at the front, and I don't know, it felt like once again I was looking for Evenepoel and he wasn't in the top 20 positions, and I was like, okay, either it's complete dogshit positioning, like Van der Poel at the Poggio, or he's not in good form today. And one of the next screens we saw was Evenepoel dropping. So, surprise for you or not?
It is a surprise, I think, mainly because of the composition of that group, how big it was, and I guess how the race for him up to that point wasn't full gas, at least from what we could see. You know, it's a large group, and if you ask who's a better climber, yeah, like I think if he just, whatever it was, couldn't convert the watts he produced at World Champs, which is obviously a one-off 40 or 50-minute effort, or a Troven course, which, yeah, not a great race, but still the watts from there did not seem to be here today. So, yeah, don't know what it was. And, yeah, I guess underperformed relative to probably definitely to his own expectations today. And also Almeida, Benji. Almeida in trouble. Like, he's dropping before Higuita. It's really surprising to me. I mean, has he been over-raced? I'm not sure. Hirschi as well. I mean, or was Hirschi, I guess he'd already spent a bit as a domestique.
Yeah, but the likes of Masnada had also attacked like 3 times and he was still there. And it seemed like Almeida was shouting at Alaphilippe and Masnada, guys, come on, I can't follow, guys. I can't follow. Please pass me and close down the gaps that are opening up, because we did see some moves following up just after that. The likes of Vincenzo Nibali, the shark himself, biting. I was not expecting him to get over this climb with the best, and well, that might become clear in a second. But the attack was quite fierce and always fun to see. I am a big fan of Nibali. Most of you will know that at this point. And I love him every time I see him in a race because he's a very offensive rider, as in attacking on the bike. And that aspect is fun, but it's not always the wisest decision. Like, in this situation, you're questioning, is it clever for a rider like Vincenzo Nibali to be making the first attacking move, knowing that he has not been able to follow the likes of a Pogacar and a Roglic on previous 2 years. Like, even more perhaps at this point. So I don't know. I think it's an all or nothing try, and it wasn't all or nothing try because Michael closed it and he tried again, and then we saw a move by Pogacar. And what did you see in that move of Pogacar?
Well, I was just completely surprised. I'm not surprised Pogacar went early. That's the way he likes to race. He likes to set his own steady tempo on the climb. We saw it at the Olympics, but everyone caught back up to him there. And he knew he had to drop the Wout van Aerts of the world. And here we have Alaphilippe Roglic behind. It's better to go clear. I am just so surprised that we're not right at the crest of this climb. It wasn't like his biggest attack ever. No one followed him or tried to snap onto his wheel. And I guess if someone bridges across or follows his attack, sits on his wheel, gets dropped, then I got no problem with it. Pogacar's just too strong. But to sort of allow him a 5-second gap and then allow him to build that out whilst you're using domestiques to chase behind, which was, is it Masnada pacing against Pogacar on the climb?
Yep.
Then, yeah, you're just allowing him to open up that gap. I guess Roglic was already struggling. Vingegaard seemed to be struggling at the back of the group. But Adam Yates is the one, who seemed to miss that move. And, Pogacar, he wasn't the favourite for this race. He somehow always flies under the radar, which is just, even for our preview, because we put too much stock in the Italian tune-up races. But still, once he does attack and have the legs to do that, you have to follow him. Like, it's just no questions asked. And no one did really. It's just then relying on domestiques to pace. I think Quick-Step had run out of guys to follow him, and he was building out that advantage. Looked very similar to when he paced on the Grand Bonnant stage and then dropped Carapaz, and similar numbers too on Rom to today, I think, for this climb to about 6.4, 6.5 on Gander for 23 minutes 10 seconds for Pogacar. But group behind, even Yates, Benji had to pull at the top. He was pulling. The gap was it went up to 38 seconds. When a Yates pull went down to 28 seconds, we get to a ridge just at the crest. There's like a little ridge line before Salavino, before they actually do the descent proper. And Quick-Step attack with Masnada, or Masnada attacks, I don't know if it was the plan, and then he's bridging across to Pogacar on the descent. The gap goes out in the group. This is the favourites group with Alaphilippe, Roglic, and Adam Yates, to 43 seconds, 45 seconds. Is that the right play for Masnada to not pace that group and to attack and follow Pogacar? Because he would have been the man to pace, because no other team at that point had two riders in that group.
I think this could be the endless discussion for this race, because you can look at it in the way of, well, Alaphilippe is in the group. If Masnada keeps on pacing and does what he did just after that, which is closing down the gap to Pogacar slowly but surely towards Pogacar, and actually ends up catching him in that descent, well, if he does that just ahead of Alaphilippe and Alaphilippe follows his wheel, then you've got Alaphilippe to sprint against Pogacar with Roglic still in the group. You'll likely have a very stressful moment on the flat section after the descent, because every single person in that group might try and attack on the flat section afterwards if it all has come together at that point. And then you have to question, well, is Alaphilippe going to outsprint the rest? Roglic in the group, he was struggling on the climb, but so was Alaphilippe. Pogacar, he's had a solo effort for quite a while. I don't know if I would trust Alaphilippe enough with how he was looking on the climb in the sprint against Pogacar and Roglic, personally. And as a consequence, I feel like the decision to send Masnada up the road was almost just as risky, which means that they chose just a situation of the two, and I don't necessarily know if one was better or the other, personally. So, Masnada was on his own closing that down. Do you have a different opinion on that, or what?
I'm strongly in let Masnada chase camp, because it creates a situation where Alaphilippe gets to sit in the group behind. He is then, when Masnada, if he catches Pogacar might, it just didn't happen, but he might not like a rider from Taconic sitting on. Masnada should sit on. If the group comes back from behind, Alaphilippe would probably be the favourite in the sprint. We also don't know, like Pogacar, his form hasn't been great hasn't been true God mode Pogacar form in the run-in. Maybe he's overextended himself. Masnada's on his best day. Maybe he can try and attack him, and Pogacar doesn't respond. He's not winning the sprint, that's for sure, but it creates different options. Whereas if you have Masnada pace the group behind, all that happens is you might catch Pogacar, Masnada will be spent, and then Alaphilippe will get attacked by Woods, Bardet, go to Valverde, and have to respond to them. So I think it improves the chances of Deceuninck Quickstep winning, but it's still Pogacar. You just don't want to let him up the road with that sort of advantage. On the descent, though, I saw Pogacar descending. He nearly crashed once, and then he created a bit of break in another corner, and then he was losing a lot of time on the descent. I know on the left-hand turns, he didn't put his left foot at 12 o'clock. He kept it at 3 o'clock. It was very, very weird the way he was taking the left-hand turns. When the right-hand turns, he was putting his knee, getting his right foot to 12 o'clock. He's losing a lot of time to Masnada on the descent. And yeah, he nearly crashed in that fashion on that descent. And Masnada also it wasn't Nibali God mode descent either, but very aggressive out of the corners. And it was Jonas pacing behind. So Jonas catched up to the group, the Roglic group, and he's pacing, and we saw him on too, he's 58 kegs. And yeah, he didn't gain any time to Pogacar either. So did you think Benji Masnada, he eventually does catch up to Pogacar at the bottom of the descent. He's closed 28 seconds himself, and then he pulls. Could you believe it when Masnada pulled with Pogacar when he caught him?
Well, not directly. I was trying to still think about, okay, was it going to be clever to pull right here or not? And the first thing that comes to mind is no, because Pogacar on paper is the fastest sprinter. So you got to try and do what Remco didn't do at European Championships, which is sitting on the wheel of the better sprinter in the group, which is in this situation quite simply Pogacar. And you have Alaphilippe behind. So best case scenario, you're saving your energy, and you can say to Pogacar, well, sorry, buddy. My team is telling me that I can't pace because Alaphilippe is behind. And Pogacar, if he's clever, is going to realize, well, okay, yeah, that's kind of logical. So either I choose to ride myself to in oblivion, or I choose to sit up as well. And that is exactly what happened just after that, because the car was getting next to Masnada. He was already complaining to his earpiece for a second there. And the car went next to him, and it was pretty clear that Bramati, I think, because it seems like the finger pointing was Bramati, the typical Bramati finger pointing, was telling him not to pace. And yeah, he was sitting up by then, and Pogacar tried one more time with his elbow, and Masnada was like, nope, this is not happening anymore. But he had already paced for a good, 2 kilometers, something like that, or 3 kilometers. Was it more or less?
There's a couple of Ks. Now, I'm not sure if he's doing soft pulls. I think Masnada has a lot of confidence in himself. Now, he's not the biggest name rider, but he believes he's a top rider, and on days he can be as well. And I think he's I can take Pog, which I actually respect. To beat someone, you actually have to believe you can beat them. And otherwise, if he doesn't think he can beat them, then what's the point of the Deceuninck Quickstep move? What we then see behind is Jonas. They get into the valley. They've let Jonas pace the descent. 48-second gap, and they begin working really well together. Alaphilippe does, I think, the chivalrous thing, and he sits at the back, but he doesn't disrupt the chase. He pushes everyone through, and he tells them explicitly, I'm not going to chase with Masnada ahead, but I'm not going to fuck up your chase either, which, fair play to him for doing that, and sits at the back. And you have a pace line rolling with Woods, Godu, Yates, Roglic, Vingegaard, and Valverde, and it's working really well for quite a while, actually. They're chopping off, they're bringing the gap down to, I think, 30 seconds, maybe even 27 seconds, 26 seconds. We still have 15 Ks of false starts to go, and then that 1,700-meter pimple through the town, and then suddenly someone skips a turn. Now, I don't know if it was Bardet or Valverde. Bardet. Someone skips a turn, and it all absolutely turns to shit. And I get it. If it's just false fight downhill to the finish, and it's just going to be a sprint from that group, okay, I get it, maybe you don't want to pull. But we have a 1,300, 1,500 meter, 7% climb. You have an opportunity to try and bridge across, to try and attack there if you're a Bardet, Godu, or Mike Woods, or Yates with a bit of punch. It's so to stop the chase before that climb when you're eating into it, and then because you want to get to that little pimple and have only a 8-second gap, 10-second gap per that you can try and bridge it, but they didn't even get to that point. They stopped pacing before that. I said after Patrick Conrad won, the stage in the Tour, I said in my Discord when he went 70k solo, and I was like, oh, he's going a bit early here. I said after that stage, I said, I'm the idiot because I believe that there would be rational decision making in a chase group, and often it's just better to get out in front of the race, and the guys chasing behind, they just don't work together well. We've seen it so often this year.
Let's be real. Every chasing group that has Alejandro Valverde in it in a one-day race, especially Lombardia, loses the race. It's the rule number 17 of cycling. It is destined to be the case. So the second I saw Valverde sitting in that group, I knew that group was not catching the front of the race. But yeah, Bergamo Alta coming up. You've got Pogacar, who's been doing most of the work in the latter part of the flat section. We have Masnada sitting there as well. Like, they've got 45 seconds again after the time went down a tiny bit after that cooperation, but it's going up again. And in all honesty, I was thinking, okay, hopefully for Masnada, Pogacar has done a lot of energy spendage on this last few meters of the flat part, because it's unlikely that I'll drop him on the climb, but it's the only situation in which I can win, because it ain't going to happen in the sprint, So we were destined to see something happening on the climb, right? It was not a move.
Yeah, exactly. So Pogacar's just like, I'm going to put you behind me, because literally the crowd is like single file. You can't attack over from behind. So Pogacar just did his pace on the climb, and then it opened up a little bit, and Masnada tried to hit him with it. And he got a bit of a gap, but then we saw Pogacar closed it in the saddle, and I was like, you're fucked, Fausto. Like, he closed it in the saddle.
That's a t-shirt.
not even stressing. And I think Benji mentioned this maybe on Twitter, and we skipped over a bit. Other riders, when someone sits on them, it can wig them out mentally. They then sit up. They then lose sight of the actual race situation. They have a tantrum. Masnada stops pulling, which wasn't even his decision, and he was sort of laying off Pogacar for like 5 meters, almost not happy with it. But anyway, Masnada stops pulling. Pogacar says, I get it. You're Alaphilippe behind. That makes sense. And just rides on the front. He just doesn't let it stress him out. He was going to be solo anyway, so what's the matter? Just backs, and he's like, I got a faster sprint than Masnada. As long as I get over the climb, I'm G. And I think some riders will almost sit up themselves, or let it affect them, which is a bit weird. But going to the final, Pogacar with poor old Masnada into this final sprint. The gap's gone out to a minute or something, because the group behind has just been attacking each other. I think a group with Alaphilippe, Valverde, Woods, Bardet has gone clear because they've attacked on that short climb. Pogacar leads out, well, not an actual lead out, but he's riding in front of Masnada, and he waits so late because he knows, like, the only way you lose a sprint from the front if you have a significant sprint advantage is if you give them a lead out. Is if you go too early and you start sprinting with 250 meters to go from 40 k's an hour and give them a full lead out in the draft. If you sprint from 90 meters, it almost looked like 90 meters or 100 meters. With the discrepancy so large, he basically gaps him a bit off the wheel, done. Posts up, Masnada can't win. Pog takes his second monument of the year, plus Tour de France victory, 11 wins this year, mostly at World Tour, maybe exclusively at World Tour level. Outrageous win from him in Lombardia. And Masnada takes a really important second, who's out of contract next year, but maybe he's already agreed to deal with De Koning. I would be surprised if they let him go, because they haven't announced a lot of their deals yet.
I think he won a Slovenia stage.
True, he won a Slovenia stage.
I think Poggi won a Slovenia stage.
Pogacar only wins non-important races when they have a commercial significance, i.e. UAE Tour or Slovenia. Legit. They're the race he wins. But for the group behind, what do you see from the group behind, Benji? Going for third place, Roglic from the back like Moritz at LBL, giving Adam Yates the lead out.
Yeah, basically went really early, Roglic, and it felt like Alaphilippe was very surprised when he saw that move on the right side of the road. Tried to move up once he saw Roglic pass by with Adam Yates with him, and I thought Roglic was taking his third spot, like easy peasy, but Adam Yates came over him and beat him for third. Like, I didn't expect that at all. Not even close.
Yeah, I know. And also Valverde was at the front of the group, and then he tried to close down Roglic leading out and then sabotaged everyone behind him because he left a huge gap, and then Alaphilippe couldn't sprint for third. So De Koning didn't get the result they wanted. I think they made the best of it, given that the race was going away from them with no one marking Pogacar. And for someone like Alaphilippe marking Pogacar, that's not something I expect of him. I think Alaphilippe, I want to give a handwritten verbal apology to Julian Alaphilippe. Someone called us out on it in the preview. LRCP consistently underrating Alaphilippe. Name a better duo. You're right. I underrated him today, and mainly not because I think he couldn't. He's not physiologically capable. I just thought he would have been, having a good time after World Championships. To be honest, I think that was why. But we saw at Provence he can do a very high climbing level on Mont Ventoux de Chalet Renard when he's locked in. And I think, do you think the race played out suiting Alaphilippe, Benji? This wasn't, I think. I was expecting Evenepoel to go early and for this to be a big fight from like 80 k's to go.
Yeah, I think so as well. But it didn't seem like Evenepoel was on the level necessary to do that today, and that's a bit unfortunate for the race because I think it would have been more entertaining if it started at 80k to go instead of like 40k to go. But in the end, I won't be complaining after the race I saw. But I do want to note back on the Alaphilippe thing. I think I mentioned on Twitter the other day about whether I wasn't sure whether he was sandbagging at Torino or not, because his dropping at Torino seemed like he was dropping at a moment where I was like, okay, it's like a kilometer into the climb, mate. This is weird. And I don't know, do you think that riders are actively sandbagging in smaller races, like, for example, an Alaphilippe in Torino, but also a Pogacar in the likes of a Torino, or in that first race, Emilia, for example, where Pogacar just was not visible at all? You think that sandbagging is a thing?
I think, so Roglic has more Pogacar has more race days than Roglic. He's got 70 race days, Roglic 62. So I don't want to hear about 60, or maybe even Roglic has less than that. I think Roglic might have because he crashed over the tour. I don't want to hear that, Roglic has had 52 race days rather, and Pogacar has 60 race days. So I got off by 10. Anyway, Pogacar has 8 more race days, but it seems that he's almost like invisible in some races. Like Britannia Classic, he came back, he gave it a good shot, but he was like, he got dropped by Alaphilippe and Honoré, right? And then DNF'd. Where's another race where, I mean, to be honest, he's been consistently good. Strade, maybe I'd expect a little bit better, but yeah, he was strong. He was UAE Tour, Tirreno.
The ITT in Slovenia?
Yeah, it was the national champs ITT. Yeah, exactly, that one. He's not at full level there. I just think Pogacar, I don't know, he's just better than Roglic. Benji is the answer. I think Roglic is a little bit less consistent over 200 Ks maybe, like the Vuelta. But then it's like Covadonga. Let me do the top 10. Let me do the top 10 first, and then let's talk Roglic. Pogacar, okay. Masnada, 51 seconds to Yates, which is a good result for him. I think Yates is looking pretty good. Roglic 4th, Valverde 5th, Alaphilippe, Gaudu, Bardet, Woods, Higuita, and Quintana, and I'll mention Valter and Nibali just for Benji's sake. So similar to Liège. Roglic, Benji, now everyone's going to say, but he came 5th. How can you say it was an underperformance? The baseline for Roglic is what he can do in a top race. This is an underperformance. If you look at the watts per kilo, he got dropped struggling on a climb when there's Bardet, Woods, and Co in the group, and he's doing at most 6.2 for 20 in the wheels. At most, maybe less, draft-heavy climb. And you compare that to the Covadonga stage. He follows Bernal 6.5 for 20 on the climb where Bernal attacked. He ripped him off the wheel in the valley and then fucking destroyed him on Covadonga. Like, it's not the same. So my question to you, Benji, is it just an off day? Is it something over 200 Ks? Is it tactics? Is it positioning in the one-day races, which are more important? What do you think it is with Roglic, or is it just variability? Because in Liège, 2 years in a row in Liège too, he's not been the strongest compared to the other like top 5 favourites.
Good question. I think that we looked at Torino this week and we saw that Adam Yates came very close after bridging to the group in which Roglic was already in, spending 30 seconds of a gap, just totally closing that down, and then almost beating Roglic in the end. Is that also an indicator then that he might not have been on the level that we expected him to be? But on paper, the watts per kilogram on Superga were pretty damn decent. And for him to do 11 watts per kilogram for 48 seconds at the end, that's still a pretty strong performance. So is today a weaker performance than on that Superga climb? Or is that just because that race is indeed shorter and less having subsequent climbs? Yeah. Well, there were echelons before, so it wasn't like it was a very easy race. I don't know. it's hard for me to answer. I genuinely don't know the response to that one.
Yeah, I think it's just we mentioned Pogacar. Now let's talk about Pogacar. He's now won 2 monuments this year, both the hilliest ones and the Tour de France. He's been the best rider this year, and he's just incredible. But one UAE Tour, one Tirreno Adriatico. But we mentioned in like at the end of the preview, Benji, I was like, is he just like, you mentioned sandbagging on Twitter, and I was like, oh, is he just peaking? You're like, but it's like 2 days between the races. And we're like, yeah, Dauphiné Tour, how can you change your form 2 days between? Maybe it's just a mental thing. Maybe he just doesn't take the tune-up races so seriously, and he's just finding his legs, and then he sees what can happen in the big ones. But I think, I just think Pogacar's crazy in these races. The Olympics, he was the strongest on the climb as well, and I can't wait to see him next year. I think he'll be a favourite for pretty much. He always seems to be underrated as well. Like, he has good value still on Pogacar. He's barely ever the favourite for these races, except maybe like Tirreno or something. Why do you think that is?
I think it's mainly because of what happened in the last week for me personally when it comes to Pogacar. Every single time that we saw him riding against Roglic, he ended up not being as strong this week. And I think the benefit today is that he went early on the climb and he didn't have everybody respond. Roglic did not have a great day today when it comes to his legs, he said afterwards in an interview. So perhaps it's just a one-off day, like that he was in bad form, and we're just overanalyzing that aspect to Roglic's year here. But I feel like Pogacar's real benefit is also that he just dares to go early. And there's a lot of riders that don't dare to go early and miss out on opportunities, end up in a chase group, and therefore don't end up winning races like the one we have today. What if Valverde tries on the climb and is in a group with Pogacar, for example? Pogacar would probably drop him, but hey, we're thinking about scenarios here. So I think that aspect is a very valuable one to Pogacar. It's also the reason that I think Evenepoel wins a lot in these smaller races as well, where he dares to attack early and he dares to put everything on the table. And Pogacar has that exact same thing, but then in the bigger races where he already is a level higher than the competition in the majority of the ones he starts riding. And in all honesty, we're like talking about Torino. He was dog shit at Torino and so forth, but he was fourth, so it wasn't like the performance was too bad. He just came a bit too short to beat the likes of Roglic that day. But all this to make my point and ask you the question, well, what's the next monument that he's doing? I tried to bribe him into riding Tour of Flanders last week, and he ended up saying that it's unlikely that he's going to ride Tour of Flanders next year. So that's
MSR.
Unfortunate. But what is the next one?
MSR? He can win MSR. Yeah, he can win.
He has the KOM on the Poggio.
Yep, I saw. I was staying attentive. I see Pogacar can win MSR. If he's in a group with like when Sagan was with Kwiatkowski and Alaphilippe, or Alaphilippe with Van Aert, he can beat those guys in a sprint. He's capable. His sprint is so good. So yeah, MSR is the next one, I think, and I look forward to seeing how he can go. And he, she, and Co and Formula, they just got to shred the Poggio and not have it like this year when it was a really big group. But obviously, Poggio Ewan could also come back to haunt Pogacar. So maybe it'll be Ewan and Pogacar. I'd love to see that. But we won't step on the off-season topics too much. Last thing, Benji, the new route for Lombardia. Like it or not?
I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. I feel like I want Lombardia to be the mountain classic and not necessarily the hill classic. And with Civiglio, it was already a climber's race, but you still had the opportunity of punchers still being able to hold on in some of the occasions. And I feel like on this parkour, that's outside of Alaphilippe, not really that easy. I don't think you'll easily see Van Aert or Van der Poel getting over these climbs too easy. Well, to be honest, I'm not sure if I can say that because if Van Aert rides like over.
In the 100%.
Yeah, I think if Colbrelli's here today, he can. I don't know. Like, Pogacar is still a different rider to follow than Evenepoel on a small climb.
No,
in
I'm
European
not following him.
I
mean, in the Jala group, and he might come back to the Jala group with Jonas.
Well, you never know at this point. He's a climby boy.
No, he knew everything. I don't know. I think the last 30Ks, yes, it's interesting for us to talk about chase tactics, to Koenig's move. Just finish it on the climb. Like, what changed? Really? Like, the strongest on the climb was Pog, and Pog won. Like, we just had an extra 30Ks.
I disagree.
Really?
I think if you have one climb as the finishing climb, you're less likely to have early moves. Or does that not make sense in your opinion? Or is it more likely because they don't have enough kilometers to chase you down anymore?
I don't know. The problem is this will never happen. But they could market it as, because today is just like Liège with like 20-minute climbs, frankly. Like it's still
Mm-hmm.
Pogacar following Formolo and Wood, same guys on the last climb. And then we have a descent and group and finish, and, away they go. But I think if you market it as a mountaintop finish, I stole this from a Discord as well, this idea that market it as the only monument with the
Mm-hmm.
mountaintop
Yeah.
finish. And you can maybe see some crazy watts per kilo. But yeah, I still like that. I like a reduced. It's good to see two guys going a head-to-head sprint, and it will never happen what I just suggested, because you need Bergamo to pay the money. The town pays the money. There's the top of
Yeah,
the mountain.
certainly.
Like, it's just commercially never going to happen what I suggested. But yeah, I think
But it's going to
I
switch
don't.
around next year again, right?
Is it?
I recall it going like 1 year this direction and the other year that direction, and then changing it around again every single time.
Yeah. I think this year suffered a little bit from Roubaix being so close. I think everyone was very hyped, spent a lot of energy with Roubaix, and I think you can spend more time, I guess, journalists and co hyping it up next year. So look forward to Lombardia next year. Pog is a god, and that's all from us. I think we'll follow us on Twitter at Lanterne Rouge CP.
Q&A is the next one.
Is it? Okay.
In a few
Benji's
days,
all over
most
it.
likely. Probably, I don't know what date it's going to be. But I'm guessing it's going to be in the next 7 to 10 days.
Okay, we
Maximum,
might do it on
right?
Monday or Tuesday, because I got to go to Paris for the Tour de France route reveal on Wednesday. But yeah, follow us
Nice.
at Lanterne Rouge CP for updates on stuff like that, or the community tab on the YouTube channel for the podcast. But thanks as always for listening. We've enjoyed this season very much. We'll have a lot more questions and, I guess, off-topic stuff for the Q&A, and we'll see you then. Thanks to Nicole, of course, for supporting the podcast. Ciao.